I remember when I was at BYU having a person I am related to who
Mm.
was like, "Can you meet me in the Wilk for lunch? I'm really distressed." He had been back from his mission a few months and he opened up a notebook and he had drawn a grid and there were like 20 rows, the names of all of these girls that he had met over the last few months. And then all of the columns were like, where did we meet? Did I ask for her number? What is her number? Did we set up a date? How did the
Hmm.
first date go? Was there a second date, etc.? And it was just like this handwritten Excel sheet tracking his dating. Here's my cat, by the way.
What's the
Um,
name of the cat?
Hunter Biden.
Oh my gosh. I
That's
love you so
amazing.
much.
Okay, so that seems to me like just not a great. I don't know. I don't know. That seems to work for some people. That's the thing.
Sure.
Sometimes I could probably use a lot more of that energy, not only towards dating, but like my friggin' budget, all sorts of things. I could probably use a lot more Excel sheets in my life. At the same time, if you are treating people like they are just supposed to be a part of your plan in life,
Yeah.
your plot, people don't receive that well. So I think it depends on where your defaults are, what type of like energy you might need to introduce to things. But at the end of the day, also, you can try a lot of different things and it doesn't always make a huge difference. You're listening to The Soloists. My name is Diana Brown, and I'm here with my friend Mallory Everton and our friend Haymitch St. Stevens.
Today we're going to talk about a question that I think many longtime daters ask themselves, which is, should I quit dating? I think that we might feel guilt if we want to just drop the rope when it comes to dating. And it felt like something meaty and interesting for us to discuss, hopefully with a man too, and a male perspective. Haymitch, thank you so much for being here. Haymitch, would you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Yeah, happy to. My name is Haymitch. I'm an artist, a writer, a contemplative, and I guess my qualifications for being on this podcast are that I'm 36 years old, single, living with my parents. So I'm
Yes.
a lot to say on this
Nice.
subject.
We love it.
Yeah.
We love a real person. That's how I feel about it. I'm so grateful for real people because I
Yeah.
feel deeply real, if that makes any sense.
To help us get into this topic, we read a few different articles. One that has been recommended several times to us, which is an article that came out in The Atlantic in August called The People Who Quit Dating. We also read a piece in The Cut. It was a conversation between a 33-year-old woman who's dating and tired of it and Esther Perel, who's a famous relationship and sex therapist. It's called How Much Work Should Dating Be? It's really insightful. And then we read a couple of other pieces as well that we're excited to get into. So, where should we start?
I am curious about all three of the people on this phone call and where we've been in how we feel about dating, maybe how we've felt about dating and how we feel about dating. And maybe a good way to get into it might be sharing a line that specifically resonated from something that we read, but follow your bliss, tell us however you want. One of the things that I pulled from the Atlantic article about the people who should quit dating was this line. One of the people who was interviewed in the piece said, dating is the only thing she's found that gets harder with practice.
Mm.
That just feels really true for me. The longer that I'm in this space, the more that the more that you can ask questions about it and your approach and whether or not there's something wrong. And so that feels like one of the reasons that I've often been very tempted / have quit dating.
Probably statistically, that means you've just had more chances to quote unquote fail at it, right? Like it's one of those weird things where the more you do it, the more it hurts because the more it has hurt. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's coming for me anyway as you speak, Mallory.
The truth is that if I was going to describe where I am with dating right now, I would say that right now dating feels like an act of hopefulness, and it did not always feel that way. I feel like right now dating feels like something I do because I have hope. It's like a prayer to like romantic love, or a prayer to myself as a person still being desirable in the world, despite my long list of technical failures, like nothing but technical failures. It's almost like an act of rebellion, I guess, because I'm like, I'm 35. I'm what many people from my background might assume, like, my situation might look kind of hopeless or pathetic, but I feel like I believe in more in love than, like, I'm like choosing to believe more in love than I ever have in some ways. And that, I think, maybe because it feels like a radical thing to do. But I didn't always feel this way, and that's why that line resonates with me so much. I've had long chapters of my life where I did not date at all, like for years sometimes.
And was that intentional, Mallory? Or was it something that sort of emerged out of, like, fear or whatever?
That's a good question. I came to it more than once that dating was making me miserable. Like, it felt miserable to me. I felt like it didn't feel natural, it didn't feel fun. I've always been the kind of, like, if I was gonna, like, type myself, I'd put myself into, like, a girl next door category where you only fall in love with her over, like, exposure that you'd like didn't choose. Like, if that makes sense. You like sit next to her in class and you're like, wait, she's not that weird. Or, and that's obvious. We all have like our own ways that we see ourselves, but I just have those, all of my most satisfying relationships have come from sort of like people who I have been like kind of walking alongside in one way or another. And so dating has always sort of felt like, does this make any sense? Like, it feels like meeting somebody in a petri dish and then performing. And the more that I've like refused to engage in it that way, the better I felt. But there were years where it just felt, especially when I was doing Studio C, which was my job when I worked as a sketch comedian on BYU TV, for any listeners who aren't familiar with that. I was just getting set up all the time. It was like, wait a second, I know a single person. Like, I don't think I've said this on this podcast yet, but there was a brief period of time where a 70 member really wanted to get me married. And so he, you guys, you can cut this if I might have to tell you to cut. I will leave this beautiful man out of it, but I spoke with him at like the last fireside that I did. And then afterward, like a week later, I was in San Diego for a bachelorette party, and he was like, Mallory, I just feel strongly that I would really like to help you I would like to get you married. And I was like 28 or 29 by that point. And I was like, you know what, Elder, you go for it. Whatever you want, you know? And I didn't really find, I think I went out with 3 guys, and they were very sweet guys, but all we had in common was the church. You know, like we didn't have anything to talk about with each other other than like, I love Moroni or whatever. It's like not enough to base a relationship on, or even really a friendship necessarily. I guess friendship, sure. But anyway, I didn't find out until I think it was the 3rd guy. I was like, so how did this work on your end? And it was like he was going to bishops and he was like bishops and his bishop friends, and being like, find the 3 best men in your ward and you call them in and you say, you have to keep this a secret, but do you want to go on a date with Mallory Everton? Like it was a calling. And I was like, oh, no wonder it's so awkward on these dates. They feel like they have to, because their bishop was like, would you like to go out with this sad girl?
Oh my gosh.
I know. That's the part that I'm like, maybe you should cut it, because it's like, it's so well meaning. But I was like, oh, that's not a great way to run a dating service.
It's such a unique experience too, like, there's a kind of matchmaker quality to it, right? Of, like,
Mhm.
you as this special hot commodity, being Mormon famous as you are, and, like, needing a kind of special facilitation of your like, as you though you're
Right.
this, like, medieval princess and you've got people managing your marital prospects for you. Wow.
Yeah. So that's all to say that, like, I spent a good amount of time sort of feeling like, God, I don't know what to do in this space at all. Like, at all,
Yeah.
at all. Like, I don't know
Yeah,
how to
yeah, yeah.
navigate this at all. So I'm going to assume that the reason that I love my friends and family and my job and my work and like my writing and what I'm doing is because I'm supposed to focus on that. And so I'm going to focus on everything I love as hard as I possibly can. And I'm going to assume that I'm going to meet him in the line of duty. And I feel like I just trusted that until I was about 31, and then I was like, "Well, I guess it's not gonna happen." And then I had, like, a different kind of breakdown, and I started a new chapter, but that's the way I gave up on dating, was basically like, I'm gonna throw
Yeah.
myself into everything else I wanted, and it sound like it resonated with me because it sounds like what these people were doing. When you actually
Mm.
really do kind of drop the rope, you're able to go to a concert and not look around and be like, well, there's a cute guy over there. And so, like, just because I thought he was cute, like, that's now the point of this concert. Like, I now have to talk to him before it ends, or else, like, it's sort of just like an exhausting way to live.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was so much from me. I really want to hear from you two now.
No, that was beautiful. Thanks for sharing. Hey, Mitch, I'm curious about you. Where would you start with answering this question? And were there any lines that stood out to you as getting at where you feel about dating?
Yeah. I actually chose two, only one of which I told you guys before the call. So we'll see where this leads.
Ooh.
The one that I just thought was funny was I can't even remember which article it was, but just this thought of maybe I'm not as hot as I used to be, and that's the sort of dating world. I think it's funny because there's certainly truth to it. Like I'm just not the man I once was, perhaps. And there's also like an inner dialogue about like was I ever that good of a catch? The line that I really want to highlight. Again, I didn't write down which article this was from, but it says we've distorted our understanding of how we organically pair up and forgotten how to actually meet people in the process. And maybe I'm old-fashioned, and maybe it's because I don't have like a real smartphone, but the little bit that I have used dating apps on my iPad has just not been a great experience. I felt like I was late to the game, and everyone on the apps was already jaded. And I guess
You just need to get a phone upgrade, hey, Mitch. It's way better. Trust me.
exactly.
Just kidding.
Maybe
It's not.
more than complaining, like what I'm really feeling is just how much I love meeting people in person. Right? There's like
Mm.
it's such a lost art in our world today, and spontaneity of encountering someone, whether it's romantically or not, just encountering someone and having a surprise conversation, interaction, experience, to me is such a beautiful thing. And so that's what came up for me as I was reading these articles. It's just a real desire to want to just go meet people in all sorts of different ways and from different backgrounds with different perspectives, because I feel like that improves me. It gets me out of my small self and allows me to have a wider perspective on the world.
Yeah. Can I ask a follow-up question about that?
Yeah, please.
So, hey, Mitch, you describe yourself as a contemplative, which I imagine like really impacts just how you experience time, how you experience all your relationships, or how you try to show up to them, which is not to mean you're some like exalted holy being or whatever, but that there's like, I imagine just like a speed and a mentality that you take to things that I'm curious how that translates to dating, if at all. I mean, I'm not as good at slowing down and being contemplative as you probably are, but I will admit that, like, I remember the first time I downloaded Tinder in, like, 2015 or something. I remember just feeling like my soul, like, curl up on itself and be like, "This is horrible." Like, what a horrible way to look at human beings, and I remember, like, because this was in Utah at the time, I remember, like, seeing some people I knew and being like, he shouldn't be reduced this way, like, and just feeling yeah, just feeling, like, so sensitive to the weird way this was, and it freaks me out how desensitized I am to that now. Now I'm like, "Yeah, of course, we all learn to translate ourselves into a few pictures and, you know, pick me biographical details or whatever." Anyway, that's just one way in which I think there's always been something that's felt like distinctly like unspiritual and crass about dating apps in particular, but also maybe dating largely. Anyway, I'm just curious how dating feels to a contemplative person.
Yeah, a few things come up. One is sort of just on a very pragmatic level. If contemplative practice or meditation or mindfulness helps us slow down or or more present. It flies in the face of maybe the efficiency with which these apps might be trying to improve our lives, right? Like they're perhaps from one perspective, they're built to solve a problem and to solve it efficiently and quickly. They're accomplishing that is up for debate. In fact, it's probably proving out that they're not that good at solving the problem. And they might even worse, according to some of these articles. So in that sense, I think simulation helps me just not fall into that race of dating being something that needs to happen and needs to happen soon. It's a more maybe natural flow of life and a more spontaneous, serendipitous. Of course, like if I ran the numbers with my friends, I'm probably going on fewer dates than those that are like highly active in the dating apps. I find that slow, more organic approach is the way I want to experience it. And then on maybe a less pragmatic or more spiritual level, I just think that a contemplative approach to dating for me is one that necessarily comes from a place of wholeness. It's not as if I'm unfinished until I meet my eternal companion. Although there's something interesting about that. Like I do believe in this dynamic and duality of masculine and feminine. And I do think that like spending significant time in serious relationship with a more feminine being is something that is really good for me and gets me outside of myself. But I think that can be true while also maintaining the truth that I am whole and that I am okay and that I don't need anything in order, like I don't need another person to validate that wholeness, that it comes from within and it comes out.
Hmm.
That's
Wow, that's
beautiful.
beautiful. Thank you so much.
Well, and what you were talking about with meeting people in person, Esther Perel brought that up as well in the Cut article that we read. She said, you sit on planes, you sit in airports, you're in queues, the places where many times we used to meet when we didn't have our head in our phones and we actually looked up and saw who was behind and in front of us. And she asked the caller, so I'm just curious, are you at ease with happenstance, spontaneity, and serendipity? And I thought her word choice was so interesting. Like, are you at ease with basically God's influence on your life? And how much are we really letting that come into play, especially when we're using dating apps to feel a sense of control?
Right. Like as you speak, Mallory, what comes up for me is sort of this mythopoetic approach to life that, and I'm not saying it's right or it's that I'm not offering this as advice. I'm just maybe validating my own approach to myself. But there's something so poetic about that's the only reason not to use dating apps or something is like the poetry behind meeting someone and having some sort of meaning-making structure born out of it other than like the algorithm paired us up. Like I think my heart chooses that poetry 9 times out of 10, if not 10 out of 10. But
Yeah.
I'm curious what you two think. Like, am I just like a hopeless romantic? And is the ship gonna set sail without me? That I don't have a smartphone.
Honestly, I worry about other cultural trends that might make it so a lot of us end up unpartnered or unpartnered a lot longer than we want to be. But I don't, to be honest, I think your approach sounds great. And I don't know. I personally can't handle the apps right now. I haven't been able to for a while. Every once in a while, I get on them and give it a try. And I'm like, after a few days, I'm like, oh, I just can't do this. And I don't know about you, but I'm totally gravitating towards something akin to a phoneless dating approach because, yeah. So there might be other reasons why maybe we're all missing the boat, but personally, I don't know about that like dating apps are the reason. It just feels like this was one of the lines that in the cut, it's like this girl was describing like with so many other tasks, about how much work you need to put in before you get results. You really don't know that with dating apps or with dating in general. It just feels like you can put in endless work and it still turns up nothing. And anyway, that's what I would say about that.
Yeah, I feel like I definitely don't think the ship's gonna leave you. I don't think that's how this works. I think there are people everywhere who are still meeting through their communities, and I'm still meeting people all the time. It might not always be romantic connections, but I'm meeting people all the time, every day. And I think the more that I'm committed to the idea of being a committed friend and community member, the more that I feel like I see a lot of possibility that I'm going to meet someone naturally that way. The thing that comes up for me as well is that I think that the only reason that I would say that it would be a problem if you weren't on the dating apps was if you felt secretly called to them, but you were afraid, and that's why you weren't doing it. You know what I mean? Like there's this term that's overused in artistic realms. I guess lots of realms, but when people call someone a sellout, I get really sensitive about it because I'm like, we don't know if a person is selling out or just prioritizing what they actually care about in their life. Like, what if
Right.
they for right
Mm.
now feel like it's more important for them to be comfortable and taking care of their physical and emotional needs and feeling safe and stable, and they're actually taking care of themselves, and they're actually answering a very deep call when they take a job that for the man or like a corporation or something like that, instead of like hoofing it as an artist on their own. And I feel
Right.
the same here. It's like I'm tempted to say, and even when I do engage with the apps, I feel like I have to do it so carefully. I have to do it still acknowledging like God's magic and mystery and saying, like, I am using this because I was born in 1989 and somehow that makes this me a part of this somehow. And if I can approach it as like, and today I feel curious about this and I want to know how it works and I'm interested in being a part of the world, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so well said. And like, I think it's a good plug, like a reminder to folks that it's, whoever might be listening to this, it's the apps themselves aren't inherently evil, right?
Mhm.
It's like all technology. It's gonna sort of exacerbate certain problems, but it's also gonna bring with it amazing opportunities.
Totally. Diana, do you want to get into your quote and where you're feeling in general?
Oh, I don't know. There's some kind of quitting that's been happening in my heart. So here's the line that I pulled. This was from the Cut article with Esther Perel. And I thought it was just so interesting because this girl who's my age kept being like, I'm trying this and I'm trying that. And I'm trying this and I'm trying that. And then Esther Perel, who again is one of the world's most famous relationship experts, she's all over the place. She keeps being like, well, have you considered this? And it feels like she kind of keeps going back and forth between like, have you tried being more strategic? And then have you tried being less strategic and just letting it open to chance? Have you tried? And she kind of goes back and forth. And it feels like she kind of lands on like, huh, this really is hard. I don't even know if I know how to solve this. Like she
Yeah.
literally says that. And she says that to the girl. She's like, maybe it's just the culture. I guess she's like admitting, like, maybe it's not you. Maybe there's actually nothing you can do. So the quote I liked is when Esther finally comes around to saying, I haven't said anything that you don't know yet, though. I wish I had an original thought about it that you may not have heard yet, but I have a feeling we're just hearing the same thing over and over. And that's
Yeah.
definitely how I feel about dating right now. I've explained, a few people have asked me this in the last few months, and I've been like, I feel like I have a stupor of thought, from Doctrine and Covenants,
Yeah.
which which is just like I literally don't even know how to think about this question in my life. I think my trouble with dating is that I've really just been looking for some kind of like transcendent, like, yes to something. Because if I'm
Mhm.
being honest, I say I'm picky and I say that these are the things that I'm looking for. But there have been times I've fallen in love with people and been like all in for people that I'm like, that's actually, you're not what was looking for. And you like don't even
Mhm.
check some of these very basic boxes, but for some reason I'm still here. Meanwhile, there are other people who will have it all. And I don't feel, for some reason I don't have that like yes inside.
Mm.
And I think what kind of freaks me out about it is precisely that. Like I don't think there's been a strong correlation between there's not been a strong correlation, first of all, between the people that I've been really into and the people who have been really into me. For some reason those don't align. It's also not the case that the people that I've been really into have had like I guess that times that I've had that yes internally, what does it correlate with? I don't know. There's some kind of like vague spiritual quality I'm looking for, but it just feels like waiting for a shooting star or something like that, and
Mm.
something that just feels like so impossible to strategize for. And I think that's why I have this stupor of thought, because like I, I've had I've had many opportunities, if I'm being honest, and I've dated amazing people, but for some reason, if I haven't been able to like feel that yes inside, I just feel this icky, I need to run, I need to get out of
Mhm.
this somehow until I end it. And then other times I felt all in for situations that have really not been good for me.
Mm.
And I've never just had the stars align where I'm feeling into it, they're feeling into it, and it's a good situation. And I don't know. I don't know what to do about that. It's very weird. Sometimes, if I'm being honest, I'm like, are we just all a little too like in our heads and even in our hearts? Is it possible to be too in our hearts about these
Mm.
things and too sensitive? Like, because I also believe deeply in the kind of love that flowers up with somebody that you spent so much time around, and you would never necessarily choose or be able to foresee the type of love that's possible with that person from the start. And all we're doing with dating is trying to catch these glimpses of what life could be like with somebody. We're not actually in the midst of it. And sometimes I wonder if somebody could just like blindfold me, do an arranged marriage, plot me in a marriage with somebody I'm like vaguely compatible with. I'm pretty sure I could make it work. But I just for the life of me don't know how to get there. And I have been in relationships where I've really, really tried. I've been like, this is an incredible person. This should work. I have no real excuse here. I've been around, I've dated enough that I know this is a good person, and I still cannot bring my heart in alignment with it. I'm just being honest. And it's like kind of
Mhm.
excruciating. It doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make sense on a theological level, philosophically, intellectually, whatever. But yeah, that's how it's been for me.
I'm curious, just to follow on, like, is there a point at which you sort of throw your hands up and lean to this wanting to quit dating?
I definitely am not like a right now, I'm not quitting dating because I also really believe in love. And in fact, even as I'm talking about this, I do feel like there's something about admitting how helpless I am here. That's just,
Mm,
I feel a spiritual
Totally.
opening even when I admit to that.
wow.
And I believe that love of all kinds is more available to us when we're spiritually open and just honest about reality and how we're engaging with it that way. I still believe in love, and so I'm not quitting the pursuit of that,
Mm,
or I'm not quitting my openness to that, but I certainly don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't,
Mhm.
or how I'm supposed to
Mhm.
be spending my time,
yeah.
if I should be lining up dates multiple nights a week and just going at it, or if I should just be letting go. I really don't know what the better strategy is. And that's why I quoted that line from Esther Perel. I feel rather helpless, having heard seems like every advice
Yeah.
given to daters in the book, and having dated a lot of different types of people. Yeah, that's how I feel.
It's reminding me of a part in the article where they talked about ambiguous loss. If you've long had an idea of a future partner and that imagined person keeps not showing up, how do you know whether to keep hoping or to move on? That hanging in the middle, Lewis told me, basically, that hanging in the middle is a very, very uncomfortable place. And Esther Perel said it really well too. It was when the person she was interviewing was describing being ghosted by a guy while making plans for their fourth or fifth date. And she said, in very simple terms, it's beyond upsetting because you begin to question yourself. You begin to question your sense of reality. Did I miss something? Was the whole thing an illusion? Is that what happens between people these days? We just toss each other away for whatever it's worth. I don't know if there's another subject that can mess with your sense of identity and reality more than this,
Yeah,
honestly. So I feel what you're saying so deeply. I'm so grateful for you sharing that because this space is brutal. It's like, there's so much
brutal.
grief and self-questioning and self-observing and analyzing and over-analyzing and unpacking and repacking, and it's been, I mean, some of the most beautiful work of my life because it's forced me into all kinds of tiny dark holes, but awful, and I just wanna sit with you in it
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
'cause I don't have
Yeah.
answers either.
Yeah. Amen. Like, I just want to double down on what you're both saying. how honest I experience you both sharing right now, that like maybe the disturbing aspects of dating, or the fact that it causes such a questioning of the self, is by design, right? Like from the contemplative perspective anyway, like that's the kind of stuff we look for, is like we train awareness so that we can notice where the disturbances are that like crack our heart open. The phrase he taught me was, just when I feel that disturbance, to say to myself or to the person, like, thank you for allowing me to feel this disturbance, right? Like, thank you for disturbing me, and for showing me where I clearly care, or where I clearly am hung up, you know? So it's
Yeah.
almost like the frustrating aspects of relationships are the point of relationships. I don't know if that's true, but it feels appropriate in this moment.
That resonates with me as well. I have a therapist last year. I got like torched by a dude when I was in like a really low moment. It was not great. And my therapist, she held strong to her like common mantra at the time, which was, he's such a gift. He's a gift to you, Mallory. And I was like, no, he's not. And like, but I agree with her now, because I had to look at so much stuff after that. I was like, how did that person damage me so badly? Like what was going on? Like, how did I give him all that power? Like what, and
Yeah.
all the questions and untangling that I had to do. He was a gift. He was a total gift. And I would say that all of my various male disturbances have been gifts. I'm a more like rounded wheel that can roll on her own than I
Yeah.
used to be.
It's so at odds with everything that I've been taught technically to think about dating, right? Like dating supposedly is supposed to serve a purpose. It's supposed to lead to a marriage, and a particular holy eternal marriage or whatever of some type. But
Yeah.
and one that I don't even understand, to be honest. I still don't understand what the point is of being heartbroken. Like I am still sometimes like, was it a waste to like
Mm.
uh, you know, spend time in this situation with this person that didn't reciprocate, or was it, you know what I mean? Like those questions still really haunt me. But maybe because of that, that's yeah, I've think there's like a spiritual opening there. I never feel closer to God like I do right after a breakup. It's just you're so raw. It's like being reborn and just like not even knowing how to use your limbs. I just feel so wrecked, but I often find God so deeply in those spaces that there's such a precious intimacy. I remember just thinking how ironic it is that like I feel like I'm so off the technical story that my life is supposed to be taking. It sucks so much, and like it doesn't add up to anything, and it makes you feel stalled in life. But
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like God is absent in these ups and downs. To me, it just feels like it's a God with a totally different plot in mind. I like the idea of like next time something doesn't go well, just reminding a person what a welcome disturbance they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're the ones that are disturbed. You know what I mean? I feel like there have been so many times as I've grown up that I've slowly been able to become undisturbed by something. And there's something really cool about being able to recognize that is something we can do, is figure out how to calm our own waters and look at things differently. And I think that's really present in this conversation because dating is so deeply disturbing. I think because it's so much rejection. Even if like you're the one who does the rejecting, I still feel this feels very raw for me at the moment, but like I still feel like even when I have been the person who has called the end of a relationship, I feel rejected by God, honestly.
Yeah.
Like I feel like why
Yeah.
didn't it work this time, and like why couldn't I fix this and this, or like why even introduce me to this person, you know? And so there's just no way that I don't end up feeling either a sense of failure or rejection, and then figure out how, like you said, what if the plot is completely different than anything we could imagine? And what if dating is giving us so many gifts and we're just not appreciating it because we're so results driven,
Yeah.
specific results
Wow.
driven?
Mm.
I agree with what you say, that like dating is especially like visceral. I forget how you said it, but that's what came up for me. Like it's so at the core of the human body and emotions, that it's on high alert all the time as a single person, right? I've had married friends ask me that. They're like, when you walk in a room, are you just constantly scanning for like available partners? And my first response was, of course not. And then as I like got more honest with myself, I'm like, maybe there is some like subconscious programming that gets really tired, because every time in a public space, I'm like, hey, maybe I'm not consciously thinking that, but subconsciously perhaps. And so it's interesting to me that this, like at the core Buddhism, is this like tension with desire, right? It's like the seeking mind, the ever seeking mind. And that's where like the Buddhist discipleship is one of like training awareness, of training the mind to go beyond those desires, to allow those desires to come and flow through and then let go of them. But yeah, meditation has offered me such choicefulness in just training awareness to notice when I'm caught in desire, versus when I can allow desire to pass, and then I can just fall back into like a more absolute beauty that's always there, right? Like it's the sun shining above the clouds. So even when the clouds move in, I can recognize shade and admit shade and darkness, but like I can know that there's a bright light behind all of that. Anyway, those are just words that come up based on what you two are sharing.
No, that's lovely. I have a follow-up question for you. So I feel like it makes a lot of sense that there would be a lot of people who are afraid to quit dating, that they really want to. Like the Atlantic article starts by talking about a woman who works with a lot of unsatisfied daters and how she always presents them with a thought exercise of what, let's say I gave you a crystal ball and you knew that you were going to find your partner in 10 years, but not before then. What would you do? And what would you do with your life? And a lot of people say, oh, I'd finally feel free or whatever. But why do you think people are afraid to quit dating though? Like really, because we don't have a crystal ball and we don't know what's going to happen. And do you think, maybe this feels like a stretch, but it doesn't in my brain right now, do you think it's similar to the reason that people are afraid to meditate and sit still and do nothing? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
is there a connection potentially between like not striving and how scary that can be?
Yeah, beautifully said, Mallory. Like I've never thought of it specifically in terms of dating, but every time I sit down on my cushion to meditate, like there's a little bit of a fear, right? Like it's a practice of intentionally stepping into the unknown, and the unknown is by definition fearful, right? Or like, and not fearful in a bad way necessarily, but it's by definition unknown. And so to willingly submit yourself to that experience is to willingly say, I don't know what's about to come up for me. And so, yeah, I think that's a beautiful connection, that it's, and not just with meditation, but anything we say we want to do to improve ourselves or to improve society, there's going to be fear there, because there's so many unknowns that we can't be in control of. And probably quitting dating fits into that perfectly, because there is such a beautiful story around, meeting a partner and falling in love and living happily ever after. The reason we subscribe to that at some point in our lives is because it sounds like a very clear known path, right? And so the opposite of that would be the unknown.
Sure. Like,
curious.
Yeah.
I think you're so right. I seriously, as we've been talking, have probably thought about like 5 or 6 like vastly different approaches to what I'm like, you know what? Maybe this is what I think. And then I'm like, maybe I think this.
That's the Esther Perel thing.
Exactly.
I don't think
I have
you've heard
nothing.
anything I haven't said. I don't have an original thought. It's just a stupor of thought.
Yeah.
That's what I think. Yeah.
I mean, do any of us have original thoughts? That's okay. That's okay, right? But
Yeah.
so I have done like a lot of reading about diet culture, and I read this book about emotional eating several years ago. One of the things she said at one point was that if you want to like reestablish a trusting relationship with your body, then you need to listen to it. And that meant like if you want to eat what's it sounds scary, but if you want to eat oh my gosh. If you want to eat chocolate chip cookies every day, all day, and that's it, why don't you let yourself do that and just do that until you don't want chocolate chip cookies anymore. Like
Mm.
you'll want a salad,
Mm.
you'll crave a smoothie. Your body will start to be like, I feel sick and tired and I don't want this one food anymore. And I think about that a little bit here too, because I feel like involving a little bit more intuitive living, intuitive dating,
Mm.
intuitive
Mhm.
working for me has been something I've been trying to pay attention to. That there might not be a clear answer in a lot of these situations, in part because it seems so clear that maybe sometimes you need to make a spreadsheet and you need to like check off all the boxes on who you've dated. And maybe you go a little too far and you eat chocolate chip cookies for 6 days and your body's like, wait a second, the spreadsheet's hurting my soul. I'm not gonna do that anymore.
I love it because it yeah. But yeah, the place where we're tempted to, like, overcorrect and just, like, indulge. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. And but eventually your body will say no. So is there something to saying like, right now you don't wanna be on the apps, but maybe eventually you'll be curious about it and you'll wanna
Yeah.
pop on the apps and
Yeah,
use them for a
absolutely.
week or something, or maybe you quit dating for a couple of years, or you decide to quit dating kind of for the rest of your life. You decide to retire and then you meet someone, 7 years in or
Yeah.
whatever. Like,
Yeah.
to me, that's what like trusting your body, trusting your instrument, trusting your relationship with God.
Right. Well, and that's really, I think that's the gift of stillness as far as I've experienced it. And like, you guys can tell me to shut up about contemplation and I will,
Never,
but
never. We want this. We need this.
I, I don't know that like the point of contemplation isn't or meditation isn't to it's not to forego all other experiences just for meditation, right? It's to deepen into the direct experience of sacred reality. So if if through a contemplative posture or through paying attention at a deeper level, if I'm able to better tune into spirit, let's say, then I can trust that life is uncertain, but because I'm in tune with spirit, I trust that in that infinite uncertainty, moment to moment to moment, what I need will arise in the moment through me and as me. It's like we already have everything we need. It's just a matter of recognizing that it's always there. That reframes uncertainty as like this beautiful playground. It's like I think of contemplation as the setup for creativity, right? And now all of a sudden I'm free to date or live or do whatever from a much more creative place. And maybe that's a spreadsheet, maybe that's a million other things, but it feels
Yeah.
skillful and choiceful.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful, Haymitch.
Okay, if you will indulge me, this is my favorite Walt Whitman poem as of late. It's called
Mm.
Sometimes with the One I Love, and I think about it a lot to the point where I'm like considering a tattoo. um,
Oh.
but he says, Sometimes with the one I love, I fill myself with rage for fear I effuse unreturned love. But now I think there is no unreturned love. The pay is certain, one way or another. I loved a certain person ardently, and my love was not returned. Yet out of that, I have written these songs.
Mm,
Mm.
wow.
Very Taylor Swift.
I'm sure she loves Walt Whitman. But I love the line, the pay is certain.
Yeah.
There's so much
I
creating happening, and there's so much that will be created by the experiences that you have, including this current Diana, which I wouldn't trade for the world. So I'm
Oh,
grateful for those dudes
thank you.
personally.
At the risk of forcing this segue, it actually feels like maybe a natural bridge to a minute ago, which is like, this phrase quitting dating. I can't help but draw a parallel. Like if we replace the word dating with life, we could have a very
Mm.
conversation, right? And
Mm.
unfortunately, I've known too many friends who've wanted to quit life. I've had dear friends who have quit life and who've ended their own lives, and it breaks my heart. And I never wanted to be well read or interested in like the mental health crisis, but because of the suffering that I've experienced, it's undeniable, right? Like I can't turn away from it anymore. And just see a lot of people suffering, and it comes back to self-doubt, right? Like how many of us are doubting ourselves or doubting that we are loved, and
Yeah.
how much of a spiral that can lead us into. Anyway, I'm just curious, like from y'all's perspective, like what's the like do you experience that with men that you've dated or just been friends with, or like the brothers and fathers and grandfathers in your lives? Like I know it's everyone, it's not just men, but that's where I've experienced it the most acutely. So like what's your experience of men suffering mentally, and how does that fit into what we're talking about?
Oh my gosh, there's like I actually like almost immediately want to cry because I'm so overwhelmed by how many
What
different
a
men
beautiful
popped into my
question.
head. Because there are times where I have like desperately wanted to like reach through the screen on a dating app and just like hug someone
Mm,
as a person, like person to person, because it
yeah.
can feel like such a cold and hard thing. And one of the things that I have tried to do lately, as I feel like in some ways part of the reason I am back to dating again is because I kind of died dating, if that makes sense. It's like a version of me completely died dating, and like a rebirth felt like I could do this if I want for fun. We'll see what happens. You know what I mean? But like I had to like kill the part of me that was dating with anything that felt like expectations. And so when I go to dates with men and I experience like some of their beautiful vulnerability. And like I often just feel like it is such a gift that I see this person enough and I'm interested in this person enough to hopefully really make them feel like they're quality and worthwhile. And I think the
Mm,
scary and hard thing is that if it doesn't work out, are they going to feel like all that love and appreciation is rescinded just because
mm,
it wasn't like a long-term match for both of us? Because I actually really deeply feel that pain right now from men. And I've been like privy to some men opening up to me basically about how they have like trauma or they're being like verbally abused by someone in their life and they're taking on all of these issues and don't know where to go with them. They might even have a therapist, but it's still like, who do they talk to? And I had a lovely man that I was dating over the summer say that, like, as we were sort of ending things, like that he would really, really love to stay friends if it made sense because he craves the kinds of friendship that women have with each other. And he's
mm,
really having a hard time finding that with other men. And like, if the trends are true, and which they are, that there are more single people than there ever have been, and that seems to be where we're trending, then we have this massive issue that I hope we can solve together, which is how can we make men feel safer to be their entire selves and to feel good about who they are right now and to be able to bring that into the room and into the space without feeling like, I don't know, less of a man or less useful or less worthy, because it feels like it's coming up in almost every relationship I have with especially straight men right now.
yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I just really value your perspectives, and so it's helpful.
Hey, Mitch, I am curious why you ask the question, and what do you
Mhm.
think is distinct for men in this space, and also what helps, you know?
Yeah, thank you for the kind of the. It feels like a generous opportunity to respond, but I'll try and be brief. But I think probably where the question comes from is going back to this phrase of like quitting dating, and then tracing that to the societal shifts that are part of that with dating apps and social media and being online in general. I do feel like there's a deep sense of anxiety and depression that's like moving through the human family. And I
Mm,
experience that in men as a cause of suicide. And so that's like, I guess the direct through line there is like, I think the same things that are causing us to be dissatisfied with dating and connection in general are perhaps, yeah, those same things that are like really just causing pain on a deep human level.
Mm.
yeah.
I feel like this sort of brings us to your question that you brought up before we started recording, Diana, which is if, like, is the question, should we should we quit dating, or are we talking about something else? Like, are we talking about needing to quit something other than dating? Or is it the way we're
Mm,
dating, or the way we're talking about dating, the way we're thinking about
yeah,
ourselves, or the way we're thinking about other people? Because
yeah,
there is so much in this space that, you know,
yeah,
I'm thinking of tentacles out into other things.
yeah, yeah. What should we quit? What
Yeah.
actually should we be quitting, if not quitting dating? But
You have something, Diana? I would love to hear from you.
I I do, I guess. I think we should know our hearts, and I think never losing sight of who we want to be. And we should quit dating if it is getting in the way of that. That's what I would
Ooh.
say. The other thought I had is like, this is really crazy because I feel like I have no reason to believe it. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I look at the statistics and it feels so dismal. And I look at my age and I'm like, geez, this looks pretty bad. And sometimes I talk to my parents and I'm like, oh, wow, they don't even have hope for me anymore. But I just really believe in not giving up on love and not quitting on that. And I'm a weird person. I feel like I'm kind of
Mhm.
like intellectually agnostic, but continue to have like just deeply spiritual, even like supernatural experiences, and including around love. And like even in the last couple of years, I feel like on the surface, my love life looks like it's been a mess, but I've had such truly beautiful and transformative experiences with people where I feel like we've changed each other. And
Mm,
I don't know. There's a part of me that's like, well, great, but none of it resulted in a marriage or commitment or whatever. But it's like, yeah, but we just really did have these, like, I have dated people who I have loved and who have loved me, and where we've like made a mark on each other. And
mm,
I'm just I'm choosing to believe that there's like a beauty and a goodness in that. And I've quit believing that I know the plot or where this is leading. Like I said, I have a stupor of thought when it comes to like where this is going to lead for me, but I definitely believe in continuing to have open, supple hearts, and that God is like working with us in really subtle ways, and that if we are open to those subtleties in our lives of like loving other people and just being with another soul beside them, whether it's for one night or 1 month or a year or forever, like just really being beside them, there's something holy about that. And so I definitely, yeah, don't believe in quitting on love that way. That's what I would say.
mm.
This is me snapping. I hope the audience can
Oh,
hear.
the snaps.
I loved that. Hamish, you want to go?
Yeah, thank you. I think what I want to quit, or rather than dating, like I kind of want to quit everything. Well,
Mm,
what do I mean? I think I want to quit trying to do it my way. Like
Yeah.
I'm like deeply drawn to Christ, and like I say Jesus is my guru. Like, and Jesus teaches by example, not my will but thine be done. Whatever that means for anyone, we'll all decide what that means for us individually. But for me, that I want to quit trying to do it my way and surrender to something much larger, much more interesting. Let's call that God's will. That's what comes up for me.
That's
that's
gorgeous.
good.
I think that what I want to quit is thinking that I'm responsible for it, or at least
Mm,
entirely responsible for it. I had this I had this epiphany during a meditation session like maybe 6 months ago. At the risk of getting too personal, I have struggled massively with my body, and I think a lot of women
mm,
do. But I, especially as I was like churning through these like layers of myself, as I started meditating more and doing a lot of therapy and a lot of journaling and a lot of writing and a lot of different types of self, I don't know, unraveling. I was like, why am I still worried about my body? Like, this feels so shallow and so frustrating. And I, at some point, realized that I think I felt, especially like I think I felt like my body had something to do with me being alone. And the way that I looked and the way that I'm shaped and all of my genetics or whatever had something to do with me not quite being good enough to have been chosen. I think somewhere deep down that just story just felt like it was really present. And it occurred to me that what that meant is that I really believed that my body had to do the work. Like that my body was the one who was supposed to like get a man to love me, that like, or get like happen to bump into a man in a bookstore. And it was like, wait a second, do I worship my body or do I worship God?
Mm.
Period. Like, is my body responsible for all of the magic in my life, or has it been God this whole time? Do I really believe that like my younger body was more magical than my current body? Or and it just shifted a bunch in my soul to be able to say like it's not my body's job. Like it is not my body's job to create all of the magic and adventure and meet all of the people. Like I just need to be here for what God's going to unfold in my life. And at the risk of sounding like someone who's passive in their life, I am going to do that. I would prefer an approach that at least was 75% that and 25% striving in dating, and truly saying like I don't think it's my job. I don't think like when it comes to something like kismet and love and another person's agency, I don't think my body is responsible, and I don't think my brain is like supposed to strategize a perfect way to do this. I think I actually genuinely have to say like, God, you get the whole wheel. So yeah.
Mic drop.
I
Hope that
know.
made sense.
That's so good, Mallory. That's so good.
Yeah, beautifully said. That kind of sums it all up for me. Actually, what you just said, that is so beautiful.
Thank you everyone for listening. If you want to continue the conversation with us, we've got a couple of options for you. You're welcome to email us with any feedback or topic suggestions at hello@thesoloists.org. You can also follow us on Instagram. Our account handle is the.soloists. And if you're not on Instagram, don't let us give you FOMO. Enjoy being unplugged from social media. Thanks everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.